The applause is getting really tepid. First of all, I just want to say thank you to Dean Farmer, to Rutgers, and to everyone for being here. It's been a remarkable trip, and it has a personal significance to me. Two of my grandparents, both of my father's parents, Holocaust survivors, my grandmother of Bergen-Belsen, my grandfather of Sachsenhausen. And before I came here, my father pulled up some old immigration documents and work papers and things like that. And turns out my grandfather, who I'm named after, lived here in Krakow in the early 40s, and we even pulled an address out that I promised my dad I would find. So if anyone knows where 20 Bialoprodnica is, I Googled it, it's 2.2 miles from here. I'm gonna take a walk at some point, so either today or tomorrow, so please join me. So again, thank you, this has been meaningful for me sort of personally. As Mr. Deo said, I'm in charge of criminal prosecutions in the state of New Jersey, and I want to ask you to think back, if you can, to the summer of 2014 in the United States. And to refresh you, in July 2014, an African-American man named Eric Garner was killed when he was put in a chokehold by the NYPD, and I think everyone here, no matter what country you live in, has seen that video. Next month, August 2014, Michael Brown dies during an altercation with a Ferguson, Missouri police officer, and days of rioting follow in Ferguson. A few months later, April 2015, Freddie Gray died in the back of a Baltimore Police Department van, and days of rioting followed in Baltimore. This was happening across the country in the United States. And anybody who was there knows that this issue of police shootings, particularly of unarmed young black men, was really the #1 issue in the public discourse. And it sparked much bigger controversies and public questions about the roles of police in relation to poor or disenfranchised communities, claims of inherent widespread police racism and brutality, questions about whether our criminal justice system generally perpetuated racial discrimination, questions about whether police were being unfairly scapegoated for a broader set of cultural problems, and most fundamentally, a deep lack of trust between law enforcement and the communities that we serve, as Mr. Goldenberg talked about. And I'll tell you that as somebody who was not only living in the United States at the time, but at the helm of the state's largest prosecutor's office, you really could feel it. If you think back to that time, it was in the media, it was in our police stations, it was in our houses of worship, it was in the air. And keep in mind the landscape in New Jersey, as Mr. Goldenberg talked about. We are an extraordinarily, wonderfully diverse state, racially, ethnically. We are the most densely populated state in the United States. We have the most people per square mile. We have urban centers plagued with violence and deep mistrust of police: Camden, Trenton, Newark, Patterson. And we have 9 million residents, 45,000 police officers who interact thousands of times every day. And we knew, sitting in Trenton, the state capital, that any one incident could become explosive in a blink of an eye and could set it off. And so in the Attorney General's office, we made 2 decisions. The first one was we had to act. We couldn't just sit back and wait and hope it didn't happen in New Jersey and hope it would pass. And second of all, we knew that whatever we did in this area, we couldn't do it alone. We had to do it hand in hand with the communities that we served. And so what we did is we began identifying and reaching out to our local contacts and identified a group of the most influential, most constructive, most forward-thinking law enforcement leaders, cops, and community leaders, clergy, community leaders, educational leaders across the state. And we pulled that group together, and we didn't just sit around a table sort of saying the word collaboration and trust. We got to work. And what we ended up doing was issuing a series of policies that were binding on every police officer and every prosecutor in the state of New Jersey, covering how are police-involved shootings investigated? How are they presented to the grand jury? What do we tell the public about those cases? Body cameras on police officers. We put out a policy encouraging police officers to wear body cameras to encourage transparency and access. And we made a big announcement. We had all the community leaders, in fact, at Rutgers, we had all the community leaders and police present arm in arm, and it was a great photo op, and it felt great, and it was hailed by the media, so big win, right? All done, right? Well, sure, for about a week. Because what happened a week later, August 7, 2015, in Trenton, our state's capital, is that 3 police officers from the state police and the Trenton Police Department, all white, incidentally, shot a young man named Radaz Hearns. Radaz Hearns was, and he's still alive, is a black young man. Whether he had a firearm or not on him when he was shot by the police became the subject of hot debate. It was recovered about 50 feet away from him. And by the way, Radaz Hearns, when he was shot, was 14 years old. So we knew we had a major situation on our hands. And again, remember, we're less than a year after Ferguson, after Baltimore, after Freddie Gray. The city of Trenton was about to blow. I know because I went to work there every day, and I know clergy leaders throughout that city. And so we had protests scheduled for our building, and the temperature was rising, and the media was trying to exacerbate this. I'm going to read you right now a quote that appeared in the Trentonian about me, okay? And this is about 2 days after the incident happened, so we hadn't even gotten started yet. Here's the quote. "His hand is all over this," Elie Honig. "He can't distance himself from it. The Attorney General's office shooting response team is under him. They report directly to him. And he's running this investigation, as far as I'm concerned, like a Gestapo, like this is Nazi Germany." Okay, so my grandma survived the camps, but she passed about 10 years ago, but I thought she was ready to come out of her grave when that got written. And so we had our crisis. And so what did we do? We called on the relationships that we had. We called on the advisory committee. And we invited them to a meeting in our office, and I'll never forget the meeting. It was a room about half this size, and we had about 50 people there. We had clergy from Trenton, we had political leaders, we had the mayor, we had federal elected officials, state elected officials, and the Attorney General at the time, John Hoffman, who's now at Rutgers, addressed the group. And then I addressed the group, and we explained, here's the policies that we drafted. And we didn't do these by ourselves, we drafted them with a lot of the people in this room, with a lot of the community members. And this is how we do things. This is how we investigate these cases. This is what information we will tell you and won't tell you, and when. And what I can tell you is this. I can't tell you everybody walked out of that meeting delighted. We still had a pressure-packed situation on our hand. But I can tell you that it helped an awful lot. It brought the community to the table, literally, and it brought the temperature way down. And I'll tell you that if we didn't have the community relationships of trust that we had already built in those first few hours and days, there's really no telling what could have happened. And so I just want to leave you with 4 messages that I learned from this about the relationships between police and communities. First of all, you have to develop the relationships before the crisis hits. You can't have it be that the first time you're reaching out to community leaders is after Radaz Hearns gets shot. We got lucky. Honestly, we got lucky. Our policies came out a week and a half before he got shot. It's happenstance, but that saved us. The fact that we had already built the relationships. Number 2, just being there is half the battle. And again, Mr. Goldenberg talked about this. There's nothing more important than being face-to-face with somebody. The importance of going into other people's spaces. I can't tell you how many churches, I probably spend more time in church than synagogue because I'm constantly going in to meet with clergy, into community centers. They come into our offices, our police stations. There's no substitute for meeting face-to-face. Third, it makes things harder if you have more voices at the table, but you will emerge with better solutions. You will get more perspectives from more different people, and as long as the rule is best idea wins, no matter whether it comes from a priest, a rabbi, a politician, or a prosecutor, if the idea is best idea wins, you will get better ideas. And finally, the work is never done. You can't just issue policies or have a press conference and declare victory and walk away. The committee that I told you about, we still continue to work to this day. We're 4 years in and counting. Like any relationship, it requires time and effort and commitment, but it is absolutely worth it. So again, I just want to thank all of you for being here and for your attention today. Thank you.